Let's get all right. So welcome everyone to this Clear Admit Application Insight event. Today we're going to focus on deferred enrollment MBA programs. If you don't know exactly what that is, because we're going to explain. I am your MC today. My name is Graham. I'm the co-founder of Clear Admit. That's all you really need to know about me. I'm going to try to mostly get out of the way and let our esteemed panelists run the show today. So let's introduce those panelists, actually. Let's start. We're first going to start with Verse Gabriel, who is the Senior Associate Director for the Accelerated Access Program at Berkeley Haas. Hey, Verse, it's great to have you back on one of these webinars.
Thanks so much for having me, Graham. I'm like super excited to chat with everyone.
Yeah, definitely. And as everyone will notice, it seems like each school has a slightly different name for their deferred enrollment program. So sometimes it's called accelerated access, early. I mean, you'll see as we go through here. Next up, we're also going to hear today from Hillary Wiesel, and she is the director of the Moelis Advanced Access Program at Wharton. Hey, Hillary, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Graham. Thrilled to be here with all of you today.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And last but not least, we're also going to talk to Christine Friedman, and she is the Deferred Enrollment Director at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. Hi, Christine.
Hi, Graham, and welcome, everyone.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And it's great to have so many folks tuned in again from all corners of the planet, it seems. But let's get started. We have a lot to cover. So, the first thing that I wanted to just give a really quick overview on is, as I was saying earlier, like what is a deferred enrollment MBA and how does it differ from a full time, like traditional full time MBA? And the answer is that it's the same degree. I mean, you're just delaying your start, right? So, there's not really a difference in terms of what you're going to study or anything. The difference is the way that you go into the program. And I've said this before, and I think Christine especially has probably heard me say this a number of times, but I have an MBA. And when I went through the process, I had to wait. I had to work for 4 years and then apply to business school. And every time I learn about these programs, I'm like, wow, this would have been so amazing to have been able to apply to business school when I was still in undergrad, when I would have been better at taking standardized tests or just like generally be in that mode to sort of apply to a program. And so the beauty of a deferred enrollment, as you can probably ascertain from my comments here, is that while you're still in college, or if you've gone directly into a master's program right out of college, you can apply to business school and you can essentially like reserve a seat in a top MBA program. And the deal is that if you get an offer of admission, you then go off and work when you finish college or when you finish that direct master's. You can work for, it depends on the program, but usually it's anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And then you matriculate into the MBA and join a class alongside those who've applied while they're working, right? So you're just part of the regular MBA program at that point. But anyway, what also is nice, and I think what we'll hear a little bit about as we get into the conversation today, is that there are a lot of perks to kind of getting your seat early, not just knowing that you have a seat, but there's some things that you get to do in that intervening period that I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about today. So that's my kind of crash course for you all if you're trying to understand how this works. Again, I'm a big fan because this did not exist when I was interested in business school, and I would have loved to have applied when I was still an undergrad. So let's move on, though. We have a starting point, which is going to be kind of a roundtable set of roundtable questions. And we're going to start with Verse at Berkeley Haas. Verse, I wanted to ask these two questions for you. And I say one reason in each case, because I want to make sure that our other panelists have things to share too. So, one reason for someone to consider a deferred enrollment program, and also maybe one reason that someone might not want to do it right away.
Now, these are really great questions, Graham. Definitely one reason, well, definitely a deferred MBA it removes a lot of traditional barriers. I'll say that, allowing undergraduates to apply early. One of the cool things is it reduces your career uncertainty, right? It gives you like the freedom and the flexibility to explore different industries and roles, knowing your MBA spot is secure. So I think that's definitely a plus there. And then maybe a reason why they may want to hold off. An MBA isn't a deferred MBA program isn't for everyone, right? It's not the fit for everyone. So if you're unsure about your goals, if you're unclear on, if you want an MBA, if you want to maybe get more work experience to provide a little bit more clarity on those goals and maybe strengthen your candidacy, that could be a reason to hold off. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Hillary, I want to turn to you. Any thoughts on these two questions?
Yeah, absolutely. I can sort of tackle them all in one and certainly echo Versa's comments, but it's obviously difficult to predict the future. And so these deferred enrollment programs are designed to give you that flexibility to navigate your career after graduation without the immediate pressure of applying to business school, because you ideally would have already done that and secured your seat. And so, as Graham mentioned, as a college senior, you're in that academic mindset, making a great time to take standardized testing and tackle the different application components. And that's something that can be challenging while maintaining a full-time job in the future. But I think in some cases, while you may want to consider a more traditional route to the MBA program, is that sometimes that 2 to 4 year deferment period could possibly feel like a constraint. And maybe an example of that could be like if you're scaling your startup while a college senior and you're unsure if that, prediction of having an MBA on the horizon could feel constraining. So that's just one example and something to consider.
Yeah, interesting point. Yeah, that's excellent. Christine, I don't know if Verse and Hillary have kind of taken up all the great responses here, but do you have any thoughts on these two?
I do. And they did. I think they had some great points to make. I'm going to go tactical practical on the first one. A reason to potentially consider applying as a college senior or direct through a master's program is that many of these deferred enrollment and early access options actually have significantly reduced application fees or are in fact completely free to apply. So oftentimes the application fee can be a barrier as you're considering applying to business school. And especially, being considerate of college students who are not yet working full time, many of these programs have really lowered that barrier in terms of just, shooting your shot and applying to business school now. So definitely from a financial incentive, there is an option to apply earlier, maybe to more schools than you would have initially considered because you have those options. As far as holding off, I think Verse and Hillary made some good points. One other I would mention is if you're really not sure, if you're curious, but you're still not sure if business school is the right direction for you, and it's a really busy senior year, I would say don't stress yourself out to try to force yourself to apply. It's definitely better if you just give yourself the time and the space to give the applications the time they deserve and the time to reflect yourself. So don't force it. The business schools will still be there later. But I will double click on Graham's point that even if you don't apply now, still not a bad idea to maybe at least consider taking that GRE or GMAT while you're still in study mode, because those test scores are good for 5 years. So even if you don't opt into this pathway, having that test score in your back pocket when you do start working full time could come in handy.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, just to dovetail back with one thing you said about the, why not take your shot? Sometimes you can apply at a reduced or almost free application fee. The other thing I should mention, and I think, I don't know if this will come up later, but I think one thing that's really interesting is that there's no penalty for applying now and not getting in. Like you could apply now, and then if it doesn't work out in 3 or 4 years after you've worked for a while, you could circle back and apply to business school, and none of these schools are going to say, oh no, we already said no to this person. It's not, doesn't work that way. So that's important to remember. I did want to just note here as we move on to the next segment that there will be breakout rooms at the end of our main section here. So each of our panelists has agreed to stick around and pop out into a Zoom breakout. So if you have questions, I'd like for you to just hold them. I know I see a couple of questions popping up in the chat, but just hold your questions because you can actually, after this main session, have your questions answered directly with any of our panelists. But let's move on and talk about the next section here, which is, I thought it'd be helpful to just put up a list of what most deferred enrollment applications sort of require. Hillary was referring to those application components earlier. And so this is kind of a hopefully fairly comprehensive list of what is required. Obviously, this varies a little bit from school to school. But just to give you a sense of, there's a form you have to fill out. In some cases, you have to pay a fee. You got to provide your transcripts. I'm assuming that when one is applying from undergrad, that you sort of provide your transcript in its current form, and then are required to also provide an updated transcript when you graduate. And that you have to graduate as well in order to kind of secure that spot. But anyway, these are the basic components: a test score, resume. Most schools have an essay question and letters of recommendation and an interview. Do all of you require a language test if someone is a non-native English speaker and did not study undergrad in English? Yeah, okay. So that's required as well. The next thing we have is we wanted to just get the deadlines on everyone's radar. I believe these are the next deadlines for each of you, although Stanford, Christine, you guys have 3, but I think the other 2 have passed, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, this is our last one this year.
Okay, so everyone's in the same boat with these April deadlines. What I wanted to do next was actually dig in a little bit to each of your programs, and so again, we'll go alphabetically and verse. What I was hoping to do here is just give you the floor to talk a little bit about, kind of what makes your program sort of unique, and to call our attention to something in the application process that you wanted us to be aware of.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I really love about Haas is, the educational autonomy that our students get just being in the full-time program. And the Accelerated Access program is a pipeline program for our full-time program. We also offer 12 specializations, where our students really get to choose and utilize multiple industries to really figure out what their passions and their true impact will be on the world. I think one of the biggest differences, though, that I'm seeing between the traditional and the accelerated access program is our work experience. While a lot of most MBA, students come in with a lot of full-time experience, this program definitely allows you to gain conditional admissions and go out into the real world for about 2 to 5 years, right? Before you matriculate, and so there's flexibility. We also offer dual degree programs. We have 4, and there's access to this early community. You through Slack groups, social media, regional happy hours, things of that nature, and also exclusive programming. We have speaker series, student-led conferences, virtual mock classes, so you get insights into what's going on and what's being discussed in these MBA situations in this community. And we also do annual check-ins, and these check-ins are super important because we want to know, how are you doing? How are you managing? What's work-life balance looking like for you? And so in these check-ins, they're annual. We're checking in about how you're doing personally and professionally, any updates, any promotions, any pivots, any relocations. These are one of my favorite things to do with our deferred enrollment students while they're in this deferred process, is to just check in with them and see what they're doing. Um, and so I love that this program allows you to secure that early admission. One of the things I also want to highlight is that we updated our second essay, and so I want you guys to be aware of that. We just want to really understand and really want you to dive a little bit deeper into the specificity of why you are applying to our program. There's so many amazing deferred enrollment programs out there, but why is Berkeley Haas on your radar? What about our program and your research tells you that it aligns with your career goals and what you want to be and how you feel as though you need to be nurtured? So I want you to just keep that in mind, keep that moving forward. But, accelerated access, I think it's an amazing program. And just like Brandon said earlier, knowledge is power. And if I would have known that such programs existed, when we were, going through grad school, it would have been a game changer. So why not, and what is the risk, right? It's free to apply. If you don't get in, hey, you reapply later. And we see what has changed and what has evolved. We love reapplicants. So I put that out there. But if you're interested, definitely check out the Accelerated Access program.
All right, thanks, Verse. I think that one of the things you mentioned that really stands out for me is just this idea that there can be a lot of risk taking in those intervening years. So you lock in your seat at Haas, and then you go off and get your 2 to 5 years. And as you're saying, like you could you can really explore things. You don't. It's not you're not under the same sort of pressure when you're doing the traditional route where you're like, oh, everything I do work wise is preparing me to apply to business school. In this case, you're into business school, and so if you want to take a flyer on a startup position or do different things, that's available to you. And the other thing that you mentioned that really resonates, I think, is this community that you become a part of. And I feel like, you mentioned that at Haas. I assume that Christine and Hillary will probably speak to this too, that, there's this community that you become a part of. So you're not just sort of given a spot in an MBA program and then left to your own devices. Like, you become part of the school community. And there's a lot of nurturing. It sounds like you're having calls with people to check in, and, it's great. So let's move on though, and let's talk with Hillary. Hillary, same thing here. I just would like to know, something that sort of really stands out for you about Wharton, and then specifically, the advanced access program, and yeah, just anything in the application process that you want to call our attention to as well.
Still on mute. Thanks so much, Graham. Certainly want to echo versus comments in terms of the community and programming. But when I think about the MBA student experience, right, of course, there's the academics, student life and community, careers, and leadership development here at Wharton, and I'm sure many of the other schools that you're considering. But many folks do come to their MBA to advance their career and professional development. And so something unique about the Wharton MBA experience is that our career management office has a platform called MAP, My Action Plan, which is a proprietary online learning development platform that dives deep into various industries, functions, and skill development. And so this is, again, a unique feature to the Wharton MBA program and the career development resources that you'll have access to. And so MAP has on-demand content with over 20 dedicated action plans for specific career paths that break down recruiting steps and quarterly actions. As when you come to pursue your MBA, there's a lot of new things involved in terms of getting acclimated. And so when you think about things from that career development lens and some of the recruiting action items that you will eventually take, we try to distill that into very personalized, custom, actionable pieces. And so more specifically, there are sector-specific resources, content, and pathways. And I think what's also really important about MAP is that it democratizes information. We don't assume that you will come to your MBA experience knowing everything about everything. So we try to really spell things out. And we also include various outcome data interactives, and additional resources to make that career exploration and job search process more accessible. And so it's a unique platform in the industry, and you have access to MAP during your entire duration here at Wharton. And it really, again, just speaks to the personalized and data-driven elements that are core to the Wharton experience. So I think it's kind of a hidden resource as you're going through the application process, but once you're here at Wharton, it is a resource that lots of students use every day.
Interesting. And is there anything about the application itself that you want to call our attention to, just
Yeah,
in terms of
sure.
process or?
Absolutely. So one unique part of the Wharton application process is our team-based discussion interview. And so this model is sort of meant to reflect the collaborative nature of the Wharton MBA environment. And the point of it is just to bring another dimension to your application, to see how you function as a member of a team, how you problem solve, how you communicate. And so it's a 35-minute virtual group exercise that provides you the opportunity to interact with 5 to 6 fellow MBA applicants in a team setting. You are given all of the information that you need if you are invited to the next step in the application process, which is the team-based discussion. And then after the team-based discussion, you will then have a 10-minute one-on-one conversation with a member of the admissions committee. So this TBD is unique. And so thanks for asking, Graham. Certainly wanted to highlight this.
No, that's great. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because it is a unique kind of aspect. Let's turn to Christine at Stanford. Same thing, Christine. I'm just kind of curious to know, something that stands out about Stanford for you, something specific about your deferred enrollment program, and then anything in the application process that you wanted to sort of just, highlight.
Absolutely. Thanks, Graham. So something that I'm going to focus on is actually the academic experience at Stanford, because I think if you ever connect with current students or alumni, they will usually lead with a lot of the social and career elements, and they sometimes forget to bring up academics, but it's actually really one of the strengths, I think, of the program. So at Stanford, our faculty believe that there's no one right way to teach and learn. So actually what that means is your academic experience in the classroom is actually quite varied throughout throughout your 2 years in the program. So you'll have a combination of case studies, lectures, experiential learning, and role playing and group work. So depending on the topic and the particular class, the class will actually be sort of dictated by that in terms of which way the faculty think you'll be able to get the most out of that material. I'd say one of the other unique elements of the classroom experience at Stanford is our faculty also believe that who teaches you really matters. And so it is not just tenure line faculty. You'll actually be learning from faculty and practitioners. So many of your classes are actually co-taught by the people who are very knowledgeable in the theory, some of whom maybe even invented the theory that you're studying, and the people who have actually been applying that day to day in the real world. And it's also really exciting that when you are reading cases, oftentimes the following week, you may actually have the protagonist of that case in the classroom discussing with you the decisions that they made, and you'll be able to challenge them and ask them questions based on the conversation you had when reading the case the week before. One of the other elements, I think, of the academic experience at Stanford that we do particularly well, and it's an area of focus that many of our students opt into, is this concept of personal leadership development. So you'll get those core classes in your first year, those required classes that everyone will take that will give you that great base foundation in sort of business acumen. But one of the things that I think Stanford does particularly well is the elective work around personal leadership development, answering that question, why should people listen to me or follow me? And so there's classes like interpersonal dynamics, managing difficult conversations, paths to power, all ways around understanding how you can really tap into the type of leader and communicator you want to be. So definitely wanted to highlight some of the academic features of the program. On the application process, one thing I want to call out is that for our deferred pathway at Stanford, we're a little unique among some of the other schools out there. Most of them have a single deadline in the springtime. As you saw, many of them are coming up in April. For us, our deferred candidates can actually apply in any of our 3 rounds. So we have rounds in September, January, and April. And so if you are a junior classman and you've got lots of time, know that you do have the opportunity to apply earlier if you're interested. But many of our deferred candidates will choose to apply in that spring timeframe because it's the time that works best for them. One thing to note is that our reply deadline is actually later in the summer. So even though our deadline's a little earlier, we do make sure that you have the opportunity to hear back from all of the schools you may be applying to before you have to make any final decisions. So you can make that informed decision for yourself.
Oh, that's terrific. Yeah, and you're actually calling my attention to the fact that many of the folks joining us, I'm guessing that we have a mix of seniors and probably a bunch of juniors as well, and maybe even a sophomore or two. That so great to know that there are multiple deadlines. Just while we're on that topic, Verse or Hillary, do either of your programs have other deadlines than the one in the spring?
No, we just won't have one for accelerated access.
Same for Wharton, just
Oh,
the one in
just
late
the one.
April.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, good to know. All right. So let's move on. The next thing I wanted to do is kind of dive a little bit deeper into the essays. And I think that's because, candidates, as you think about applying to school, one of the things that always comes up is, oh, I've got to write these statements or, answer these questions. So I thought it'd be fun to kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive. And so the assignment here, we'll start again with you, Verse, is pick an essay and just tell us a little bit about it. Like, why did your team ask it? And what advice would you have to someone who's like sitting down to work on it? And I know you mentioned that it sounds like that second essay question's been revised a little bit. I don't know if this is the right one or if it's a little different now, but feel free to share whichever one you want to talk about.
Absolutely. I think essays are one of my favorite things to review in the application materials. And I think I would love to dive deeper into the first one, what makes you feel alive when you're doing it and why. I get a lot of questions on the road about it or via email. Like I said, it's one of my favorite ones, but the typical question is this a fun response? Is it supposed to be professional? Like, what am I supposed to do around this? Like, what does Haas really want? How fun can this be? And my answer to that is very. It can be really fun. I think the best ways, the best essays are personal. They're engaging and even unexpected. And if something like excites you, we want to know about it. If you like rock climbing, if you like improv, comedy, Legos, hip hop, baking, like embrace it and bring it to the admissions journey, but bring it to us authentically, right? And authenticity, it means a little bit more and it matters more than formality in these instances. Does it need to connect to my career? Not at all. While it can align with your professional, careers and goals, the key is to highlight what truly energizes you, right? We want that to kind of illuminate through, your words. So a compelling essay is about passion, not just about your career aspirations. And what makes a really good response? Just be genuine, please, please. Personal meaning, explain why this, activity really makes you feel alive. Take us on that journey with you. I would love to feel like I'm there with you when you're talking about maybe boxing. I would love to be in the ring with you. How does it feel? Is your heart rate beating? Are you sweating? Are you ready to launch the next hit? What is your mindset like? So just take me on that journey, but it needs to be brief. It's only 300 words. So please don't address the topic too major for this section. I've seen it and it's chaotic, so just pick one thing. Even if there's 30 things that make you feel alive, just pick one and give us a little bit of insight into it. And consider writing this essay last. And I say this and people are like, wait, why? And I say this because once you've completed the rest of your application, take a step back and maybe ask yourself, what have I presented to the admissions committee? And if you, highlighted your academic and your professional aspects, and maybe a little bit of the personality is missing or how you show up on a day-to-day, I would lean into the personal. So that's what I would say. But once again, it can be professional or it can be personal or it can be a mixture. So, yeah.
I'm really glad that you commented on that. You knew that I had sent you some notes and I was like, oh, this is one of those big questions. It's like, what do you talk about here? And is it okay, if you're an accountant or you're someone studying accounting and you've had those summer internships as an accountant, are you supposed to write that, making spreadsheets makes you feel alive, or can you talk about mountain climbing or whatever you're doing on the weekends? So it's really good to know that, that everything's fair game and that people should just be really authentic here. I do want to ask you, you all have, as part of the application, candidates have to submit a resume, and there is a video, I believe there's a video on your website that talks about making your resume for business school, for the application process. But I just wonder if you had any tips for undergrads, because, it's one thing when you've been out in the workforce for 4 years and have at least one or two kind of full-time jobs to point to, but any tips like as to how someone might approach building their, writing their resume for your application process?
Absolutely. It's a common question. That's why we put that, resource up on our website. But I would say, highlight your strengths. We understand you may not have full-time experience. You don't have these big, fancy titles. So your internships, your part-time work, there is space on the application for your extracurriculars, and maybe even some leadership roles, formal or informal. But this is a way to, kind of highlight that. But keep it concise. I would say that. So stick to one page, maybe 3 to 4 bullet points per role, to maximize the impact. And kind of, I feel like your essay should your resume should tell a story, right? And so treat it like an essay, guiding us through your professional journey thus far. And some optional additions, I would say maybe list your job offering if you have one. So like incoming analyst, it's a nice to have, but it is not a requirement. So just keep that in mind, no pressure. And I would just say, use the available resources, take advantage of the application bootcamp, and the accelerated access guide. And, we have some webinars coming up in March. So where we walk through the entire application. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's terrific. Appreciate you mentioning that, especially that idea that if you do have a job offer already, upon graduation, include it. But we'll get into this later. All of our panelists know that not everyone has their job lined up yet when they're applying to these programs. So fear not if you don't yet have a job. Let's turn our attention to Hillary at Wharton. Hillary, same thing. Do you want to talk about one of your essay questions for us and just tell us why do you ask it and any advice you have for someone tackling this question?
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe we can dig through the first essay. So how do you plan to use the Wharton MBA program to help you achieve your future professional goals? And so, the core of this question is we really just want to understand what is your professional orientation now and how do you see the Wharton MBA helping you get there? And so this is really just about trying to project your success or future. And so really articulating, because I spent my time doing X, Y, and Z, here's what I think I'll do in the future, and here's how I'd apply that at Wharton and how I'd spend my time at Wharton. And so, I think something that we certainly keep in mind, and I'm sure colleagues on the call keep in mind as well, is that we certainly understand as an applicant coming, as a college senior or immediately from graduate school, you don't have to have the same level of clarity that someone maybe 5 to 6 years in their career may have. And we understand that, and we take that into account, and we review the application separately, right, from the direct enroll rounds. And so the 2 prompts are relatively straightforward for a reason, right? Like if you think about the undergraduate admissions process, maybe that was you trying to tell a unique story or be a little bit more narrative. And so being direct, pragmatic, logical is certainly welcome here. And just a plug, we are hosting an application tip session in mid-March, Friday, March 15th at noon. So we'll dig into some of this a little bit deeper as well.
That's great. So with enough time before the deadline to, to help folks. That's terrific. I want to ask you about the second question. And I guess it's a question that sort of applies to both of these, but, and you've touched on it, but I just want to dig a little deeper. And that is that, if you look at the second question, you're asking people to think about how they're going to make contributions to Wharton and what they're going to bring from their past. And one of the things I wondered is, like, to what extent could someone, if they know what they're doing post undergrad, like maybe they have a job lined up, or they know that they're, starting a company, or whatever it is that they're setting out to do, is it fair to kind of do a little bit of speculation about, or at least comment on the fact that they're hoping to bring whatever work experience they've had into the classroom or into the community?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point. And you certainly don't have to have your postgraduate plans lined up at the time of the application. But if you have a sense of that's where you'll be getting, that is how you'll spend your time beginning your career, and it is a 2 to 4 year deferment, you can allude to that. And with the second essay, again, it's really just projecting where you think you'll spend your time here. And if that is informed by where you will be prior to Wharton in those 2 to 4 years, you can certainly mention that. But to your point, Graham, earlier, there's not a defined or a preferred, major or postgraduate plans or industry or company per se. We want to see candidates from all backgrounds and all sectors.
Okay. And I guess similarly, if someone, let's say, go back to Versa's comment about, I think she mentioned mountain climbing or whatever, but let's say someone's an avid mountain climber and they actually have on their calendar that they're going to be summiting some peak 1 year from now. They've begun training, et cetera. And they're, I guess
Yeah,
they could speak to the fact that they're hoping
absolutely.
to be involved in that at Wharton or something like that.
Absolutely. We would hope that, they would want to be a part of McNulty leadership or any student clubs. You can community is such an integral part of the Wharton experience that we just want to understand, even if it's from a co-curricular standpoint, how you'd like to spend your time here as well. So that's certainly important. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was on the table too, because I know sometimes people might think they have to only talk about academic, kind of stuff or work related things. So,
community is
okay.
key.
Excellent. Christine, same thing here. We've got your essay questions up on screen. Take us through one of them and give us the backstory and what you're looking for.
Absolutely. Well, I'll take the first one since that's the one that usually people end up spending the most amount of time on. And you can see that ours are pretty short, right? But that doesn't mean that it takes a short amount of time to answer them. So our first question has been our first question for a long time over at Stanford. And we are asking you, what matters most to you and why? So there are many elements of the application where you're going to be able to share your professional and academic accomplishments and successes with us. This is really a space intended to get to know you, the person behind all of those things. And so my first piece of advice is remember that this is a 2-part question. We're not just asking the what, but we are asking you to explain the why. There is no right answer to what the what is or what the why is. This is going to be a personal answer for each and every one of you, even if you may end up having the same what as somebody else. Your why and the reason behind that is going to be distinctly your own. And so remember that. I would advise that you don't spend any time scouring the internet to find what matters to other people. It's most important that you really sit alone and answer this question for yourself, because it's not just for this application, right? The hope is that you're actually tapping into this so that when you are embarking on your career, when you're embarking on this MBA experience, that you are recognizing what your North Stars are, what those things that matter to you are. So they'll inform the decisions that you make in terms of the places you'll end up or the career choices that you'll pursue, because it's really important that you recognize those things that matter to you. So you can check in with yourself if you suddenly feel that you're kind of veering off course. So I would say take time. Right? These essays do take time for all of the schools. You can save them for last, like Ver says. You could start, put it away, pick it back up again, whatever method will work best for you. But give yourself time to really reflect on these questions and answer them for yourself. So some of our advice, knowing that this is quite a personal question for Stanford, write it for yourself. If you're comfortable, be willing to share it with maybe one or two people who know you well, and see if they can call you out on whether or not this really does feel genuine and authentic to you. But just know that we keep these essays in confidence. They are just read by the admissions committee. And this, again, is really just our chance to get to know you and who you are and the person that will be showing up in our community. I'll tackle number 2 real quick, because hopefully the answer to this essay will end up writing itself, because as you're engaging in programming like this, learning about so many different schools, you'll get to understand what the offerings are at each and every program, and you'll be able to clearly articulate why one versus another might be a perfect fit for you, and why you might be the perfect fit for them.
Excellent. Yeah, it's funny. I just want to. You just brought something up that I feel like we should tell everyone on the in the meeting today, and that is that I personally, and ClearAdmit has this philosophy, I do not recommend that people go and read other essays. You will see there are books out there, that you can see at Barnes and Noble, essays that worked, or I'm sure they're on the internet everywhere, right? You will never find an essay at clearadmit.com. I really think that it actually is detrimental to read other essays before you set out on this journey, because you will just invariably, it will kind of squash your own creativity to read what else is out there. So I know it sounds counterintuitive, but I would say just go from the heart and follow this advice. And I recently recorded a podcast with Erin, who's the Dean of Admissions over at Stanford. And I asked her how to approach this essay, what matters most to you and why. And she said, we had a conversation about making a list of like just things that have happened to you in your life that are important to you. This idea of kind of like just keep a running list for a little while, and almost like journaling to sort of arrive at you kind of look at this list afterwards and maybe connect the dots and realize there's a theme here that you could then write about. So, there are lots of ways to approach these questions. I did want to just ask you one thing, Christine, about you guys also have a question. I guess it's not a full essay. It's like a short answer question where you say something to the effect of like, how are you going to productively engage during the deferral time period? And so I just wondered if you would comment on that, like, especially again for someone who maybe doesn't yet have a job offer post college and is still sort of figuring that out. Like, how does someone respond to that question?
Great question, Graham. And this question is not intended to put that pressure on you. Let me be very clear. We are not expecting that people applying to deferred enrollment have the next 2 to 4 years completely mapped out. It is not expected that you have a job offer in hand when you apply. If you do, tell us about it. We're curious to know. But this is really for us to understand sort of where is your head at this moment in time. So if you say, I'm interviewing for a job in this industry, or I'm considering a job in this industry or that, just let us know about sort of the direction you're thinking about taking. A couple of things to note. Like I said, one, this is more just to understand where you're at that moment in time. Neither the admissions office nor the Career Center will hold you to that. When you arrive on campus, you are allowed to change your mind. You're encouraged to explore. So for us, the expectation is that you are working full-time or studying full-time, or a combination of the two during this deferral period. But we don't really put any parameters around what that work is. And in fact, some people will tell us that they have a very clear plan when they are applying. And once they're admitted, they say, well, I was going to do that, but actually now I'm interested in actually doing something else. Now that I have a little bit more freedom, knowing that Stanford is out there on the horizon, I'm going to take this leap. Maybe I'm going to join that lesser known company or this small startup where I can wear a lot of hats rather than joining a big organization where maybe I will feel that it might take a little bit longer to get exposed to some of those things. Some people will set out and do exactly what they said and then spend year 2 or 3 or the 4th year of the deferral trying something different. So some people will do just one thing during that time. Some will do 2. Some will do even more than that. So it really will be, your journey that you'll be determining for yourself.
Okay, excellent. I did want to remind everyone that our panelists have been kind enough to agree to bounce off into these little Zoom breakouts that we'll just do in a few minutes here. Actually, we just have one more little segment to go through. So you can ask Christine, Verse, and Hillary any questions that you have about their programs, and you can actually bounce between rooms. You can't be in more than one room at once, but you could, get one of your questions answered and then bounce over to the other. I think they've agreed to hang out for 20 or 30 minutes or so. Let's move on to our final section, though, and this is kind of the lightning round. So again, we'll start with you, Verse. What's one thing that deferred enrollment candidates can do to stand out in your admissions process?
It sounds cliche, but being authentic. Show us who you truly are, what you're passionate about, what makes you tick. If you are sarcastic or super creative and you love theater, we would love for you to, showcase that. Don't just tell us what you think the admissions committee wants to hear. It never goes well. But yeah, just tell your story, focus on being human. The admissions is holistic.
Okay. Hillary, how about you?
Yes, certainly echo those thoughts. I think the job is not to stand out and to just be you. And through the application and all of the various pieces, we want to glean, where are you right now? Where do you hope to go? And how does Wharton align to you and your future goals? So just keeping that in mind as you put together the different pieces.
Yeah, and I think it was you, Hillary, who made a great point earlier where, the undergraduate application process is a little different than the business school application process in that I feel like the business school application process is a little bit more, down to like, be direct, straightforward, be yourself. You don't have to sort of produce some, really amazing narrative kind of storytelling sort of thing here. Christine, how about you?
All right. I'll plus one what Verse and Hillary said, but then I'll add one as well. So for our deferred candidates, remember that we are assessing and looking for the future leaders, right, that we want to see in our program. And so we'll be looking at your application within the context of your lived experience so far as a student. But because we are looking for that future leader potential, it is important for you to highlight the chances where you've had a chance to demonstrate that leadership in whatever capacity it might show up as. So maybe that was a club leader, maybe you were the head TA, maybe you were the head research assistant, maybe you took on a particular project during an internship, maybe you're a captain of a sports team, maybe it's a leadership role in a community organization, or maybe it's a leadership role that you have assumed within your own family, right? Like, I think it's important to make sure you consider all the different ways you have maybe shown up as a leader in the different communities or spaces you've been a part of. But just knowing that we are assessing, is this somebody who's going to not only succeed in our classroom, but beyond? Where are elements where you can highlight examples of you having done so already?
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because I really do feel like the undergraduate experience offers so many instances for leadership that are not just the summer internship where you had a job. I mean, there's so many things people do on campus, whether it's running a radio station or, being a part of a volunteer community. I mean, there's just many, many things that people can point to. All right, so next lightning round question, Verse, we're back to you, is describe your student community in 3 words.
Collaborative, innovative, and kind.
All right, Hillary.
We didn't pick the same 3 words first. I would say, but we'll see what you pick, Christine. I will say for Wharton, collegial, ambitious, and adventurous.
Nice. Christine?
Verse, we did have one of the same words, but for me and at Stanford, I would say kind, supportive, and dreamers.
Okay, excellent. Well, you guys are in the same state, so I can, you could see you get share one word. Different coasts,
Promise there's some kindness on the East Coast.
Excellent. And I can't remember, do we have one more lightning round question or no, that was it. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have you guys bounce backstage. I do want to sincerely thank Verse and Hillary and Christine for all your time today. You guys are going to bounce backstage. I'll keep the crowd warm and then we'll release them into your breakouts. But we just want to give you guys a second to take a breather and get into your breakouts. So thank you so much for doing this. I always have fun talking with everyone about this. All right, so our panelists have bounced backstage. While we give them their breather, I do want to thank everyone that's with us today. I mean, gosh, it's just been so great to see all of you tuning in from across the globe and from so many amazing undergraduate institutions. I did want to just call your attention to a couple of things that we do at ClearAdmit. First and foremost, I mean, I just want to be very clear. Our site is entirely free. We're not selling anything to you all. And there are all these different things you can do at clearadmit.com. We have a podcast that airs every week where we talk about MBA admissions. You can post your profile anonymously on a tool we have called ApplyWire on the website and get feedback. There's an archive of interview reports from candidates. When candidates interview at these schools, they leave little reports on our website that you can read to help you prepare. And we also break down essay questions. So we don't provide sample essays, as I said earlier, but we do, kind of talk about, oh, these are the questions the school's asking, and here's how you might want to think about them as you begin your brainstorming process. And then we have a very popular tool that some of you may already have experienced called Livewire, where candidates can leave updates on what's happening to them in the application process, when they get an interview or an acceptance letter, et cetera. So I do want to thank everyone for being with us today. We're going to open up our breakout rooms in a second here so that you can go ask questions of Verse, Hillary, and Christine. And the last thing I'll leave you with is we are actually doing this again, same time next week. Some of you, I think, are probably already signed up for it, but we're going to sit down with admissions representatives from Chicago Booth, Yale School of Management, UVA Darden, Columbia Business School, and Carnegie Mellon Tepper. So join us same time next week if you want to hear from those schools. We'll have slightly different questions, try to keep things a little bit interesting for everyone. And later in the month, we're actually also going to be talking with representatives from many of the same schools, but for their Masters in Management programs. So again, always on Wednesdays, always at noon. You can get all the details on our website. But I want to thank everyone and wish you well as you head off into the breakout rooms to talk with our panelists. So thanks so much for joining us, and I hope to see many of you next week.